All right, all set. All right, I'm starting now.
All right.
Sunday. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of True Story Live. I'm Jason Cripps. I'm one of the hosts here on the panel, and I will introduce the other two folks in just a moment. First, I'll just say a quick hello to everyone. Welcome back after we took a much-needed break last week. Honestly, we're just completely exhausted. I've been working a new job, and of course, Jen works a lot as well, and so we decided to take a little break. So apologize to our regulars who show up every week, and you know who you are, and we really appreciate you. So then tonight, when we're getting started, we were having a little bit of trouble with the operating system. The OBS was not working, and we were this close to having to call it, but Glenn did some tweaking, and it seems to be working okay right now. So just want to give you guys a heads up. We don't anticipate any problem right now. Since 23 minutes ago, it's been working fine. And so we're hoping everything goes smoothly from here on out. Okay, so tonight's topic we're going to be discussing is one that I think is very important. And this is absolutely a great write-up done by Glenn again. And the title of this one is Solitude and Loneliness Lost in the World. And we will get to that topic in just a moment. First, I'll introduce the rest of the panel. You know her, you love her, my wonderful and hardworking creative wife, Jen. Jen, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good, despite having eaten too much for dinner.
Yeah, tell the listeners about our splurge four-day weekend.
Yeah, we're having like a couple of cheat days, and
Yeah.
I think my stomach's like, yeah, no, we're good, we're done.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the OMAD diet.
That's right. Yeah. So we've been doing the keto diet, and it has, speaking personally, it has lots of benefits. And not having carbs for a long time, I've really gotten used to it. But then we decided to just do St. Patrick's Day and have a couple things.
St. Patrick's Week.
So it ended up, it was my bright idea to do several days.
My tummy
and then
rebukes you.
Yeah, that's right. And then jump back into it and start with the working out and really buckle down. I'm not saying it was a bad idea, because I sure have enjoyed it. But one of the things that we don't get to have on the carb diet is really good bread. And when Jen and I first met, we bought sandwich making stuff and bread and all that, and she made what I call Dagwood sandwiches, which, if anybody remembers the comic book from back in the day, Dagwood, he made these huge sandwiches. I remember seeing them. They're like, you can't even really take a bite out of them. They're big. And of course, Jen's weren't that big, but they were bigger than a normal sandwich. So we called them Dagwood sandwiches. And in the comic, of course, he would put it all together and stick a huge toothpick in it with an olive on the outside of it. I remember that. We don't do the olive thing, but it's really been fun. But I'm looking forward to getting back to the regular schedule tomorrow. I think Jen is as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So welcome, Jen. Glad that you're here as usual. And also we'll introduce our wonderful producer and the writer of this show, as well as many others. Our friend from Australia, Glenn. Glenn, say hello to the peoples, please.
Hiya. How's it going? I'm good.
Yeah.
Sorry about the issues with the software, but we don't have any images. I can't do too much about it. We're just sort of just hoping this bit holds together, so we thought give it a show, give it a go, and see what happens.
Yeah, give it a go, as the guy from that chapter says. Give it a go.
Give it a go.
I think he's from Scotland, right? That guy.
Yeah. Ireland or Scotland.
There's a show called That Chapter, and the guy talks about murders that have occurred, and he's kind of witty, so it's interesting to have kind of a dark topic. But he's he's a little jokester, but very interesting broadcast. If you have a chance to check it out, if you're into that sort of thing, it's real true crime type stuff. And he says, "Give it a goo, give it a goo." So there that is. Okay, before we get into the write-up, Jen, if you would love to say hello to the peoples in the chat.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Glenn, I think you sound a little far away, and Janet, I'm having a little issue hearing you, and I think Janet is too. So I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, so Glenn has got a new computer he's connecting with, and so we were testing the sound out, and then he sounded pretty good, but he does sound a little far away, so I'm sure he'll make the adjustment. He wants to make sure people can hear him for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we have got Celine. Hello, Celine. We have Janet. We have Annette, Sandrock in the house,
Yes.
Stephanie, and I think that's everybody so far.
That's
Did I
okay.
miss somebody?
I don't think so.
Hey guys, great to have you here. Thank you for being so diligent with hanging out with us and discussing things.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, and we like reading the conversations in the chat. So as usual, Stephanie has made a good example of highlighting her comment with True Story Live. Makes it really, really easy to see. It appears in orange on my end. So if you have any comments you'd like me to read, we just so you know, unless you tell me otherwise, if we see comments in the chat and they pertain to the conversation that we're having, we'll probably read them anyway. But if you have a comment in particular that you like to add to the discussion, try to highlight it or use all caps. It makes it easier for me to see. But we'll be perusing the chat for those comments as well. If you're listening to the playback, thank you for joining us, and we hope that sometime, if you're just listening to the broadcast, sometimes join us in the chat. We would love to hear your conversations. And I'll say this again at the end: if you have any comments or suggestions for the broadcast, any topics that you would like to hear us discuss, you can send them to truestorylive.crips@gmail.com. And if you have any communications with the other two members of the panel, Glenn and Jen, you can signify that in the chat, and I'll make sure they get it and they can get back to you on their own. All right, without further delay, we'll get into this topic. And I'm excited about this one. Jen and I were talking about this, and we think this topic affects a lot of people. So the title again is Solitude and Loneliness, Lost in This World. Solitude is used to teach us how to live with other people. Rage is used to show us the infinite value of peace. Boredom is used to underline the importance of adventure and spontaneity. Silence is used to teach us to use words responsibly. Tiredness is used so that we can understand the value of waking up. Illness is used to underline the blessing of good health. Fire is used to teach us about water. Earth is so that we can understand the value of air. Death is used to show us the importance of life. Paulo Coelho. On tonight's show, we discuss the value of solitude and examine the root cause as to why loneliness is often an integral part of existence for many of us. Statistics show 40% of people in the USA label themselves as coping with loneliness. This may actually be higher now with the social distancing attached to COVID-19. Tonight's music is Lost in This World, and the link is included in the description. It is described as electronic vibey vocals, open with simple piano, quickly building to energetic rap, whose lyrics open the door for reflection, futuristic hand claps, and lo-fi ambient vibes lead to an introspective resolution, featuring Random Dan and Stock Marley. By the way, great lyrics if you care to listen. Definitions for this show. Solitude is the state of mind where we communicate with self without any external influence. It is essentially an opportunity for us to embrace our alone time. Loneliness is a state of mind where we feel empty, out of balance, and live with a sense of isolation from self and the world. Looking at the quote above, we see the word solitude is used to teach us how to live with other people. How might that be? The contention is that without solitude, our thoughts, desires, creativity, and personal growth don't get the opportunity to be explored and flourish. If we don't have it together, or if we don't have it together on an internal level, how can we be expected to have it together when we interact externally? As the song lyrics say, quote, I've never felt so lost in the world. How can we be so connected but feel so alone? End quote. I think most of us have experienced being at a gathering, etc., yet feeling detached and empty, just wanting to go home. Sure, the presence of another person is relevant to situational loneliness, that being separation caused by loss or grief, relationship breakdowns, communication issues, lack of options, financial constraints, and social isolation, etc. So, what do? Look for another person and slash or a belief system to fill our internal void? Do we tend to sacrifice our identity when our situation leads us to feel lonely? Does that work? The other part of our equation tonight is personal loneliness. That caused by our fundamental view of self and how the world works for each of us. Quote, sometimes I don't understand it, taking this life for granted, everything we've been handed, everyone's lonely inside, end quote. Nobody is saying the choice to be by oneself is an indication of being lonely. However, to those who feel loneliness within, what are some of the factors that come into play? A, being frightened of the future because of past failures. B, a lack of honest interaction with self and others. C, the belief that having superficial friends and lovers is a loneliness insulator. D, there's a medical issue that should be investigated, e.g., depression. E, lack of understanding of what a healthy relationship looks like. F, the thought of intimacy and associated vulnerability is too unsafe. G, we are stuck in a situation and cannot see a way out. H, loneliness as a way of life has been accepted, whether preferred or not. I'm sure there are many other factors. Feel free to point them out. So you have your SHIT together. You spend constant time in solitude. You've thought it all out, dealt with your past, have a healthy outlook, addressed all the questions, and yet you remain in a state of loneliness. Why? Is there any person out there who can honestly say, I don't embrace the feelings of being valued, respected, appreciated, acknowledged, and loved by others? I don't believe so, because it's part of our human condition. It's in our DNA. Perhaps that is the root cause right there. We feel lonely when we feel nobody understands us or is prepared to make the effort to do so. A real friend is one who walks in when the rest of the world walks out. Walter Winchell for that last one. Okay, well, there we go. So, so this topic is a big one. I have talked before with Jen, and we'll get into more detail as we come to the questions. But I tend to isolate when I'm struggling with something, whether it be financial issues or emotional or spiritual. In the past, at least, I should say that in the past, I have tended to isolate. I've really been working on it because I don't think that isolation is good. The issue is, though, if you don't have people in your life that you feel you can trust, what other choice do you have? And these are some good questions coming up, and we'll get to those shortly. So let me try to scroll down to the first one. And as Glenn mentioned, usually we have slides, but because of the issues we're having, we couldn't even load them tonight. So just please forgive us for the lack of slides this evening. So we'll we'll be going at it from another direction. So just briefly, I'll go over the definitions again quickly. Solitude is a state of mind where we communicate with self without an external influence, any external influence. It is essentially an opportunity for us to embrace our alone time. Loneliness, however, is a state of mind where we feel empty, out of balance, and live with a sense of isolation from self and the world. So, looking at the quote above, and that's the quote I mentioned at the top of the broadcast. Uh, um, so, the quote is solitude is used to teach us how to live with other people. How might that be? So, we'll start with that one. Solitude is used to teach us how to live with other people. It's an interesting quote. So again, I read the definition of solitude, which is very different than loneliness. In fact, in comic book lore, Superman, if anyone remembers correctly, had a fortress of solitude. Now, in the comics and the movies and things like that, so Superman, who is the quote unquote savior of the world, he would go there to get away from it all, and it was in the North Pole, if I remember correctly. And he would just, when things got too heavy or hot for Superman, he would just go to this fortress of solitude and hang out, by himself, And then when he felt like he'd been alone enough, then he would come back and do his job of saving the world and protecting mankind. Truth, justice, and American way. So I would say that if Superman needs solitude, then we certainly would need that as well. Altogether different than loneliness, though. So as far as solitude is concerned, Jen, what do you think? Is it used to teach us how to live with other people? And how might that be? How does solitude help us learn how to live with other people? What do you think?
I think we do tend to, well, I can only speak for myself personally.
Sure.
I tend to work on myself when I'm in a place of solitude.
Yeah.
And I think when you spend the time to work through your stuff and even take the time for self-acceptance, that's something big that I work on during solitude.
Sure.
I think it does affect you being able to be around people better.
Hmm.
I used to be painfully shy and maybe a little bit awkward, maybe not like super awkward, not the
Right.
most awkward person, but and
Right.
a lot of it had to do with low self-esteem and just being really shy and
Hmm.
what's the other word I'm looking for? Like no self-confidence.
Right.
So that really does affect being social with other people.
Hmm.
And people can see it too. I think it makes them
Sure.
uncomfortable to a degree.
Sure.
And they don't know how to read it. They could read it like, oh, this person doesn't like me, or um, they seem uncomfortable. I'll walk
Hmm.
away, talk to somebody else that seems
Yeah.
more comfortable with talking,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, at first when I read this question, I was thinking, well, wait a minute. I didn't quite agree. But no, once I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I think has to do with self-acceptance and working on yourself and
Sure.
there being a confidence that comes out of that. And then you're just there's something about it. There's something about it that just makes social happenings a lot more smooth and natural, and
Exactly.
they just feel better.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
So I would agree with the comment, and I'll tell a quick story. So the idea of solitude, I call I need alone time. That's the term, alone time, rather than saying I need my solitude. Uh, and in my former life, this would be something I would tell my mother oftentimes. Uh, she would ask me. She always was concerned about what I was doing. Seems like my
Mhm.
family in general always wants to know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But she'd ask me what I'm doing, and I said I'm just going to spend some alone time. And sometimes I was criticized for that. Why do you need alone time? What's wrong with you that you need time to yourself? And so that went on for a while. And then during my first marriage, I ended up needing a lot more alone time. And at first, my ex-wife seemed to be very understanding of that. And after spending time together, she would say, "Okay, well, I guess you'll have some alone time." And I would say, "Oh, great!" And I would get my alone time. The thing was, and how I'm going to tie it into this quote here is that in that marriage to her, I did need more alone time because it was excruciating to take care of her in the way that I did. She was physically fine, but emotionally and spiritually needy to the point of, I've mentioned before, laying in bed all day and not being able to hold down a job. And this isn't like bash my ex, but it's to make a point. So after spending the whole day taking care of her needs, I found that I needed my alone time or solitude in order to reset myself, to be able then the next day to do the same thing over and over and over again. So that was then. Now I am with a person who is delightful to be around, and it's not taxing for me.
Yay!
Yeah, I still get my alone time. In fact, I get plenty of alone time, and it's not a point of contention. It's not, oh, okay, go have your alone time, Jason. I can't believe that you even need that. In fact, I'm with someone that enjoys her own alone time
There you
or
go.
or solitude. She described it as a time she works on herself, and I do the very same thing. Sometimes I'll be playing a game and listening to that chapter or a sermon or something else, and internally, my mind is always working on current problems or current issues with myself, spiritual and mental. Recently, even working on physical, the idea of working out more often, and I've kind of cut back on that, doing very good with eating, but I just am being honest with myself that if I want to make more progress, I'm going to have to add that. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately during my times of solitude. That has been very beneficial to me. So, like Jen, working on herself, I find that a necessary thing as well. So, I very much agree. Solitude is used to teach us how to live with other people. If I didn't have my solitude, I think that being around other people all the time would be way more taxing. I feel like I wouldn't have the emotional preparation to be able to be around other people in the way that I do,
Yeah.
especially with the job I have. So I do customer service for TurboTax. And these are people that are frustrated about having to do their taxes. They're frustrated about software issues. And if I didn't have my alone time and solitude, I would be ill prepared to be able to handle other people's problems. So I get plenty of that solitude to be able to help me prepare for even my work. So I think it's a good quote, and I think I've gone on long enough with my answer, but we'll go to Glenn. Solitude is used to teach us how to live with other people. How might that be, Glenn?
Pretty much how you described it, Crips. I think being an introvert by nature and living with another introvert by nature, I think it's just like you said. I think without a requisite amount of personal space or whatever you want to call it, alone time, solitude, I think I'd go crazy. I think it would
Yeah,
make me way less sociable or way less inclined to be sociable
right,
out in the world if I didn't have that sort of reflective
right.
personal space and time. Yeah, I think it's a necessity for me. Absolutely.
Oh, great. Thanks, Glenn. Well, Stephanie Trexler said that she likes her alone time. She made that clear. And I'm just going to peruse and see if anyone else made any comments that they wanted to share. Celine talking about Baby Yoda again. Okay, that's all right. Welcome, John. We didn't say hello to you at the beginning, but we're saying hello now. Hope you're doing all right. Okay, Janet, I think we said hello to you already. Good conversations in the chat, but I don't see any other. See Stephanie's comment. I like being alone. I hear you, Stephanie. I think it's important. John says, I love to be alone, especially up north in the woods. Oh my, it's so awesome. Talking, praying to God, observing the most organic beauty of God's creation. That's a good statement, John. I would agree with you. I can say that being from Michigan, where my grandparents used to live, it's one of my favorite places in the world. And unfortunately, um, my uncle decided to sell my grandparents' house when they both went to be with God. And I wanted to, Jen and I had made an offer, and we wanted to buy that house and keep it in the family because it's very important to the grandchildren. And he wasn't having any of it, and I'm bitter.
At least you're honest.
I'm bitter about it. I'll have to get over it eventually. I don't know. Maybe we'll hit the lottery or something, and I can go and try to buy the house back at double what the guy paid for it. He got it. He got it for a song. It's on a river, and it's an older house and it needs some repairs and stuff like that. But we had intended on doing it little by little, and it would have been a really great deal. But so, yeah,
Yeah.
that was a place. The point I was going to make was that it's got woods on the back side of the property, and there's deer that come through there all the time, and the sound of the river, and it's just to talk about having solitude. When I would go visit there, I would just go out walking around and just enjoy nature. It's just a very beautiful place, and
Yeah.
I hate that it's well, it's still there, but it's not available to us anymore. At least right now. We'll see what happens. Jay Lynn, hello. I don't know if you were here before, but hello to you. Jay Lynn says, saying that, having no one validate me or just that I think I believe differently doesn't make me bad. My mom runs because we don't think the same. Okay, that's probably in reference to something else that I'm not aware of, so we'll leave that there. Stephanie says, bad signal tonight, guys. Just keeps buffering.
Uh-oh.
Good night and God bless. Sorry about that, Stephanie. I don't know if that's on your end or our end. Guys, if you could let me know in the chat if it's buffering for anyone else, or is it just Stephanie? Didn't you mention, Glenn, at the beginning that she was having internet issues? Is that right?
Don't think so.
Okay.
All I can say is that from my end, it's been spot on 100% coming out of here. So.
Okay, so Jen says it's roboting out. Jalen says, don't get me wrong, I want to work on myself. It would be nice to be in a state of peace while I'm alone. Yeah, I hear you, Jalen. Glenn is too.
It's better now. It was really bad for a few minutes there.
Okay. Celine says it's fine on my end. Thank you, Celine. I appreciate you letting us know. Okay, well, we'll just keep going. So that was the first one. The next one is the contention is that without solitude, our thoughts, desires, creativity, and personal growth don't get the opportunity to be explored and flourish. If we don't have it together on an internal level, how can we be expected to have it together when we interact externally? So I'll go first on this. So this tying into what I've already shared about getting the time to kind of reset. If I don't have that time, I find that I get way more frustrated by other people than I would if I do have that solitude or alone time.
Yeah.
So without that, how can we be expected to have together when we interact externally? I would say that you wouldn't be. I wouldn't. Let me speak for myself. I wouldn't be able to in the same way.
Yeah.
I would be more punchy. I would be more cranky. I would not have the same grace that I feel like I have most times when, well, especially with the job that I have, I would not have the patience to be able to deal with people that are seem to be personally irritated with me that they lost their password, their email, and their phone number, and they want to know why I can't just turn their account on, why they have to jump through hoops and whatnot in order to get things hooked up. And the reality is people sign into their account once a year to do their taxes. It's not like a social media site where they check in every day. It's something they do once a year. But it's not something I'm doing. But I have to be patient, even when people seem entitled and they think that I can just flip a switch and make it good for them again.
Yeah.
Um, so if I didn't have the alone time, as I said, I wouldn't be able to deal with the attitudes of other people. So I find it to be very important. Okay, so what do you think, Jen? How can we be expected to have it together when we interact externally without our solitude if we don't have it together on an internal level?
Well, while you were reading it the first time around, I was thinking for years I did not have it together internally.
Mhm.
And I had to play into the upkeep of this image at the store that I had with my ex.
Mhm.
Like everything was great. Like we had the best job in the world and this great marriage, and I think I was able to keep up this facade because I wasn't close to people. Um it was very shallow, I guess you could say. I
Sure,
mean, there were a few times, where I'd have friends that came by that were customers, and I could talk to them about deeper stuff, but it was very rare. That was very isolated.
sure.
And I didn't really have any support, someone to just lose it with.
Yeah.
And just, and not only that, but I had spent so long not just almost kidding myself,
Mhm.
minimizing the things I was going through and experiencing, and abuse and neglect to the point where I don't even think I didn't believe it.
Right,
Like I was believing this narrative that was just completely a farce.
right.
But now in learning how to be honest with myself and other people and just be more authentic and more open, it's funny how now I need even more time alone.
Mhm.
Before it was like, avoiding alone time because that's when the reality of what was going on was it would just sneak in, and
Mhm.
I didn't want to look at it. I was like, run
Sure,
away.
sure.
Now it's being authentic with myself even,
Mhm.
and validating my truth and the reality that's going on, which just opens up, uh, gosh, such a deeper level with other people, connecting with other people. And
Mhm.
but to get back to the question, it definitely, I am more honest with myself and more understanding and gracious
Great.
to when I need alone time and when I need a
Yeah.
day to just veg and stay in my pajamas.
Uh-huh.
And just gauging, what do I need,
Yeah.
that kind of thing in order to, because, when I think about, being believers and God wanting us to pour into other people,
Mhm.
um, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Oh.
And God definitely, his spirit fills us.
Mhm.
But I always love that picture that you and Glenn shared with me when I was coming into the light and seeing the situation I was in. It's that whole oxygen mask thing of,
Uh-huh.
if you're on a plane and it's,
Yeah,
not crashing, but, going down, they tell you to put the oxygen mask on you first so that you
yeah.
can better help the people around you. And
Right,
I think that's such a great word picture because really and truly, you can't pour from an empty cup. And
right.
I think I've tried doing that before. It ends up being less authentic. You get frustrated with people. Your fuse is shorter.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
just so many things. And it can be kind of destructive to yourself too,
Mhm.
because you're internally on a subconscious level, you are telling yourself, I don't matter.
Right,
And this gets a little sticky, but it's like, for me, it was other people matter. It wasn't other people matter more than me. It was other
right,
people matter and I don't matter at all.
right.
So that was just a very unhealthy position to be in.
Well, sure, sure.
So yeah, that's my answer.
Well, that's a great answer. Yeah, the thing from the plane, it's in case of uh, lack of cabin pressure or something happens to the cabin pressure, and the reason they want you to do that is so you don't pass out.
Hmm.
Like put the oxygen on your mask on yourself first, and then help your neighbor with their mask so you
Yeah.
don't pass out. So just like you said, Jen, you can't pour from an empty cup. That's a great analogy as well. In the same way, if you're passed out, you can't help anybody. So
No, and I was passed out. I was no help to anybody.
right,
And I wanted to be. My heart was to be there for people, and
sure,
but I had hardly anything to give. It was just very
sure,
sad, And
yeah.
now it's a completely different oh my gosh, completely different.
It is completely different. You are such a giving person. It just amazes me how giving you are, but I don't see it now, at least, as you lacking or feeling like you don't matter. I feel like you know that you matter, and out of that, you're able to give fully to other people, and
Yeah.
especially me. And I'm grateful for that. I wouldn't feel good about accepting things from you if you were giving it from an empty place or from a passed out place.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be good. I wouldn't be able to accept it. So I'm grateful that you see yourself as being worthy of your own cup being filled, so that you
Yeah.
can give to others. That's a really really great analogy, Jen. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, you're up, Glenn. So if we don't have it together on an internal level, how can we be expected to have it together when we interact externally?
Well, I agree pretty much with what each of you guys said, but I'm just thinking when you were having that, when you're just sharing there, where does it leave us with today's generation? If I look at the kids of today, if you said to them, a kid today that's, oh, go and sit in that chair for 5 minutes and just contemplate, they'd go crazy.
Oh yeah,
Where are we
Yeah.
heading with this society? Whereas that solitude is not embraced. It's about being entertained every minute
yeah,
of every day.
Yeah.
hmm
I mean, so I just wonder where all this is heading. I just can't see that there's going to be a lot of well-adjusted people as we go further
no,
into the future. I don't know what
no.
Completely
anyone
agree.
else thinks, but yeah, it's really incredible to me.
Well, you bring up a good point. They're actually doing studies about the effect of social media and the isolation that comes as a cause of that. Because you think, well, I'm talking to people all the time online. And
Yeah.
I'm chatting with people that I've never met, in my life. Never met them personally, but
May
we're
never meet.
we're chatting. We're chatting and we're talking and stuff. That I'm sorry, that is not interaction that I feel is helpful to a person moving forward socially and intellectually and emotionally and spiritually. Um, I'm sure there are people that would disagree with me, but the study agrees with that concept and saying that it is breeding isolation. It is growing a generation up that just wants to be entertained, and they're not relating. The sense of community is dying. I've talked about that before. The sociology of the idea of community and people helping neighbors, and introducing yourself to people when you move into a new place, and bringing over covered dish, to welcome someone to the neighborhood. All that is going by the wayside. Nowadays, I don't think that happens anywhere near as much. Someone moves in, and you might even have the best intentions to introduce yourself and get to know someone, but a lot of times it doesn't happen because we're too busy with our devices, especially children. Just as Glenn pointed out, it's not about when we were kids. There's a meme that's been going around that shows uh, like five bikes laying on the ground, and I
Yes.
forget exactly the way it's phrased, but
It
it's the same.
says, it says, this is how you knew where everybody was.
Right,
Instead of texting and stuff, it
right,
was which yard had all the bikes in it.
right. Exactly. Because we used to ride our bikes. We used to, spend time outside. And now you just, everyone wants to have a device, and they're content to sit inside and just be online. I think that is dangerous. I think it is actually not a good thing for society moving forward. That's my opinion. Of course, I could be wrong, but that's what I think. It just, it's making people try less hard. It is isolation to me. You're just at home with a device, and you might be chatting with someone, But there's no face-to-face interaction, and I think it's destructive. This is my opinion.
Yeah. I went years just, uh, becoming a workaholic, against my will to a degree.
Yeah, of course.
And I was amazed at, with working, eating, and sleeping every day for days on end, no days off for a really long time, how my social skills in person sort of atrophied,
Yeah,
especially when it came to hanging out with somebody one on one. It was a
right.
completely different animal, being behind a counter and,
Sure.
checking people out that were coming into the store and buying things. But being one on one, it was just like, wow, I used to be shy and it's just gotten worse. So it's definitely been a little bit of a hard road getting back into the swing of how that all works.
Mhm.
And it is like working out, getting out there and you're building your social muscles again. But you're right. I could completely agree. I think the social media and less face to face and in person interaction, it just, there's parts of our social being that atrophies,
Yeah,
because I think people are more comfortable to
yeah.
some degrees talking online.
Mhm.
You're not having to worry about your makeup or your hair or what you're wearing or how you're going to
Sure,
get there.
sure.
And you, when you're typing especially, you can think about what you're going to say before you
Yeah,
say it. It's a lot different in person, and you don't have
yeah.
like delete or emojis.
That's true. Yeah, once you say it, once it's out of your mouth,
It's
that's
out
it.
there.
You can't draw it back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, good answers, guys. Appreciate that. So, as the song lyric says, I've never felt so lost in the world. How can we be so connected but feel so alone? I really like this quote. I think we've all felt it, and Glenn puts it in here. He says, "I think most of us have experienced being at a gathering, etc., yet feeling detached and empty, just wanting to go home." I can't tell you how many times I've wanted that, and I'm a social guy. I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself an introvert. I wouldn't consider myself an extrovert either. It's probably somewhere in between. I definitely have moments when I want to be around other people, and I have other moments when I just want to have solitude. But I have been in situations like church gatherings and things like that where um, I've gone mostly to have the covered dish. They used to do that. Maybe they
Potlucks.
yeah, potlucks. Maybe they still do that somewhere. I don't know. Maybe that's still a thing. But growing up, they would have at least one Sunday a month at the church we went to, where they would have that, where everybody in the church would bring a different dish, and there'd be like three different kinds of green bean casserole and fried chicken and baked chicken, and not to mention all kinds of desserts. Uh, and I used to love it, but it wasn't just the food though; it was the social situation, sitting down at a long table in a cafeteria,
Fellowship hall.
fellowship hall. Thank you. That's better than cafeteria. Thank you. And just talking to people, it was something that I desired. But there were times that I would go and I would just want to eat and then leave, which isn't quite fair because the main purpose of it is fellowship. So I just wanted the food and to be able to move on. But getting back to the point, so how can we be so connected to feel so alone? Yeah, you get the impression that if you're around a bunch of people, you're connecting that, but that's not necessarily true. You can be in a group of people and not venture out of your own shell. You can isolate even though you're around others.
Yeah.
It can happen. Um, but in that, I've heard other people say this, that they're around other people all the time, but they feel so alone. It can be that way at work. You can work in an office and you can work around other people, and you're isolated your own cubicle, your office, and you're interacting with people throughout the day. But is it meaningful interaction? Is it deep? Is it personal, or is it work related? That's the question.
Or surface.
Surface, yeah, could very well be surfacey. So that's a question you have to ask yourself. But this is a great one. I think it's possible to be around other people a lot and to feel so alone. To me, it depends on the degree of communication and how involved you are in these relationships in these gatherings.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. What do you think, Jen? Have you experienced that?
Yeah. I've mentioned a couple times on various shows that we've had that because I am of deep nature, and always have been since I've been little, I not it's not that I have a hard time being surfacey and talking about the weather and,
Right.
lighter things. I just like going deep. And
Sure.
um I always, not always, more times than not, I would find myself kind of like a fish out of water when it came to that, where everyone around me at church specifically seemed to be fine with the surface and
Sure.
um just almost kind of keeping relationships on an acquaintance level. And I
Sure.
know relationships take time. My mom once told me, she was like, she helped me realize to some degree maybe my expectations weren't realistic because
Right.
I was wanting to connect with people on a deep level pretty
Mm.
soon, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And she was reminding me, it takes time.
Yeah.
But there were times that I was at churches for over a year and part of the worship team. And it just seemed like people were not interested in opening up and sharing about the deeper things that they were dealing with in life,
Right.
whether it be sin or, marital struggles or anything. And
Mhm.
so when I did open up and share, it just was like crickets,
Yeah, I
and
remember that.
very uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
then, and me talking about how sometimes when one person opens up, it kind of oils the machine. It kind
Sure.
of paves the way for other people to feel a little more safe
Yeah.
with sharing. And a lot of the times that didn't work. And then having, being involved, serving in the church, and then the churches being kind of big, and going through some really, really, really difficult stuff in my marriage,
Right.
the entire marriage. I mean, it
Right.
started from day one, was really hard for me because I would either have people just throw scripture at me instead of
Right.
relating, or and I'm sure there were some times where they couldn't relate because they weren't going through the same thing. But
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, out of all these people, there's got to be somebody that's having issues in their marriage too that
Sure.
can like get on the same level or empathize with me.
Sure.
But it is one of the loneliest times I have ever felt, to be in a crowd full of people and to be hurting and confused and
Yeah.
feeling alone in a huge crowd, a sea of people and a sea of believers, especially. It's
Right.
just, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. It was really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So,
I can imagine it was. Yeah, you've talked
yeah.
about that before, and I think it's difficult when you put yourself out there anyway. You're trying to be transparent, and as you said, you're trying to kind of kickstart the conversation. You think if I put myself out there, surely someone is going to pick up the slack on that. They're gonna
Yeah.
they're gonna notice that, hey, I'm reaching out here. And I agree with you that, especially in a church situation, that should be the place that you can do that and get a response.
Yeah.
So I feel horrible for you that you put yourself out there, and I think that's not your issue, that's their issue, and it is pervasive, in my opinion, in church situations, because it's like, well, it's fine for someone else to have a problem, but I don't want to share because then I'm being transparent and I'm being weak. And
Yeah.
what if someone else doesn't respond to me?
And I think one of the things that seemed to be a kind of a common thread in some of the churches that I experienced this in was, if you're having trouble in life, it means you're living in sin. And I mean, we're all living in
Wow.
sin, but or you're not on good terms with God, or you're
Right.
not actually saved. Like there was just this whole negative
Right.
kind of connotations with you struggling,
Yeah.
and it going against that myth of, when you get saved, when you become a Christian, your life is easy, and
Right.
the church perpetuating that fairy tale. It's not
Sure.
true. If anything, it gets harder.
Yeah.
And what was one of the other things I was going to say? I do want to encourage people though. Being in a place now, I can because of God and just the healing that I've gone through. I can be in a place now where I put myself out there, and it's planting seeds. It's putting myself out there, hoping that maybe it'll resonate with somebody. And if it doesn't, that's okay. But me becoming a part of the larger group that shuts down is not
Hmm.
going to help anybody. So it's like I'm in a place now where I can be vulnerable and I can share. And even if I still get crickets,
Hmm.
the thought and the idea that it could touch someone, and even if later, maybe not in front of people, but they pull me aside or something and say that they can relate,
Right.
is just such a wonderful thing
Yeah.
for me and for them to
Hmm.
have that connection, and to not feel alone in
Hmm.
it. So I'm grateful that I'm in a place now where my being okay and not feeling so alone isn't hinged so much on if people respond,
Yeah.
because it was hinged on that before. And I'm not saying that's not important, it is, but it just was devastating at that at that point
Yeah.
in time. So
Yeah.
now
Of
it's
course.
it's like, okay, I'm still gonna put myself out there and be vulnerable, and maybe it'll help somebody,
Yeah.
so.
Well, thank you, Jen. Appreciate you sharing that. All right, Glenn, you're up. What about this one? I've never felt so lost in the world. How can we be connected but feel so alone?
Is there anything worse than being in a room with a group of people who are artificial and
Yeah.
just totally, you know, want to talk about their money and all of
Yeah.
their achievements and how good they
Right.
are and yada yada yada. Man, that's enough to make you cringe. I'd much rather be here on TSL with authentic people who have no cash. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, I mean,
No. Yeah.
it's a different world. It's a different world and one that out. And why would I spend my energy being with people who are just basically people I don't want to associate with just to talk about the weather and make social niceties? No thanks, I'm not going to be bothered.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No,
Nope.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Glenn. Janet says, same here, Jen. I never enjoyed the surface convos, but went deep quickly, and most do not want that. So that's from Janet. Go ahead. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I wonder if some people do want that. It's just so out of the norm,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. There's almost a fear. Again, as I said, if you put yourself out there, the fear is that no one's going to pick up on it, and respond. So then as you said, Jen, then you're just standing there listening to crickets. There's no response,
Yeah.
which is what happened to you. So that proves
And
the
that
rule.
it's tough. I was going to mention too, because in a way it is rejection. You
Right.
feel rejected. You're like,
Mhm.
ouch. Uh,
Yeah.
but I really do wonder how many people out there really want to go deep. But I can imagine that one of the things would be safety. Is it safe? I think we've mentioned this before, where there are people that are manipulative and they have lesser than kind motives, and they open up quickly and they share
Right.
information very quickly in order to get you
Yeah.
to put down your guard and share things
Yep.
that you would
Oh,
normally
yeah.
share. So you have to be careful.
Yep.
So I do wonder if there are some people that don't open up right away because of
Sure.
that as well, having been
Sure.
burned.
I think
um
a lot of people have been burned, and
yeah,
that's what's happened, just like you were, Jen.
yeah, we're all walking around burned.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Jen says, or Jalen says, is it in me? Is it within me? Is it my mind? Do I have to accept being by myself? I struggle with that every day. And then she says, I used to share when I was younger. I learned that I needed to be picky to whom I shared my heart with. I understand, Jalen, because there are a lot of people, as Jen just mentioned, it is a narcissistic thing to do, is to share a little bit from their false self to get you to share from your real self, and then they can use it against you. So I understand why you would be picky, to use your word, picky with your heart, because
Yeah.
you have to be careful. There are bad guys out there that will trounce on your heart if they have a chance. So I understand that. And then Jalen says further, I was the chatty Cathy talking to everyone. I don't do that anymore. And she's referring to when she was younger. Yeah, I get that. You learn not to do that. Then Janet says, okay, to be transparent, you have no idea how often I have gotten to the point of praying, Lord, help me not be crazy. We are peculiar people who are odd compared to the mainstream people who are now focused, etc. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Janet. We are peculiar people compared to the quote unquote norm. But as we're talking about, even in churches, there's a lot of disappointment, at least for me, and people not being more open about their own struggles. I think that I would be bowled over to be in a church situation where other people were sharing from the heart, even in that situation. I've mentioned this before. I was surprised when I would go to Al-Anon meetings with my mother to support her because her mother was an alcoholic, and I've talked about that before. That is a group of people that do share from the heart. That's why they're there. So I enjoyed those meetings because of that reason. People were being transparent. They were sharing their struggles. And I find it sad that that happens in an Al-Anon meeting and it doesn't happen in small church groups. I should say, in my experience, it doesn't happen. Maybe you're involved in a church and a small group where it does happen, and if that's the case, I'm glad that happens for you if it does. Janet says my sis and I are not close at all, and she only will speak of surface stuff. She's not greedy. She's not greedy, materialistic, but will not discuss faith, emotions, opinions, or past tragedies, relationships, etc. Well, I'm certainly sorry about that, Janet. You definitely need to find someone to talk to about the deeper subjects, just like Jen was sharing. And she is a deep person, and I think that's why she lit up when she met Glenn and myself, and
Oh
from
yeah.
the way she talks about it, she finally learned that there was other people out there somewhere that were willing to talk about deeper subjects and not just surfacey stuff.
I told these two guys that I felt like I had been just in a crowd full of people walking, like I picture the sidewalks of New York City,
Hmm.
and everyone's looking down and I'm looking around looking for people like me that are
Yeah,
open and want
yeah,
to talk about deep things. And then I saw these two dudes and their faces were up like mine was, looking around for other
hmm,
people like
yeah,
themselves and me, and their faces were shining, and
yeah,
it was just such a refreshing beam of light.
yeah.
It was
And
wonderful.
you took it and ran, Jen.
Yeah.
I never will forget that when we first met, and then you just were. It seemed to be eating it all up, and we're just talking about chatting three-way on Messenger, just
Yeah.
talking
About
about stuff.
God and
Yeah,
faith and life and
yeah, and that's how we got to know each other, based on those conversations. So that's a wonderful blessing. Um, uh, John says, "God have mercy. The egos out there. When there is money, egos fly high." Yeah, absolutely, John. That's true. Um, Janet is referring to her sister, I believe. She says she also feels free to criticize me, but will not tolerate me having an opinion about her family choices, etc. Yeah, of course, Janet. Of course, a person is free to talk about you, but when it comes to talking about themselves and being open and transparent, they're not capable of doing that, for sure. And then Janet says sometimes people wait till their deathbed to share anything meaningful. Yeah, deathbed confessions. Yeah, that's a term because it's true. People want to unload when they know that they're about to die, and there's not going to be any. They don't have to. They don't have to stick around and watch any damage it does. So a lot of times that's true. They'll be honest toward the end. So there you go. Okay, moving forward. Finding the next question here, just a moment. situational loneliness. So this isn't a question, but the term situational loneliness, meaning that you're not lonely in every situation, but certain situations you are lonely. This is something I have heard talk about before as well. Um, that being separation caused by loss or grief, relationship breakdowns, communication issues, lack of options, financial constraints, and social isolation, etc. So the question is, so what do we do? How do we solve these issues if we're finding that we're lonely or in these situations of being alone? What do we do? Glenn gives a couple of possibilities. Look for another person and or belief system to fill our internal void. Do we tend to sacrifice our identity when our situation leads us to feel lonely? Does that work? So we'll start
No.
out. What do we do? What do we do, Jen? You want to go first?
Um, no, we're talking about feeling alone, not the other one,
Not
not
solitude.
solitude.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
we've switched to talking about the kind of the negative side, the loneliness part that people feel,
yeah.
situational loneliness or just loneliness in general.
Hmm. Well, the one thing that I want to go to, and sometimes it seems cliche, or I don't even know if cliche is the right word, but I know for me, it was hard to spend time. It was hard to turn loneliness into solitude to where it can be
Oh,
um,
good point.
not painful but rejuvenating when I was not self-accepting.
Yeah,
And I don't mean self-accepting like accepting my sins and living in sin. I'm talking
right,
about not liking myself, hating myself,
right,
thinking I was stupid, ugly,
yeah,
dumb. I just these things that I had picked up, these lies
right,
along the ways of life.
right.
It's amazing to me how when you can look back at your memories as a child and growing up, how your memory seems to latch on to the horrible things that were said to you
Mhm.
more so than the good. I've always wondered about that. It seems to sear into your mind a lot more than the compliments.
Sure, yeah, the
But
negative things that people say.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
not to interrupt, but that's a good point.
yeah.
It takes more good comments to override the amount of
The
bad
bad. Oh
comments.
yeah, it's crazy. So when you're not comfortable with yourself and you or yeah, just not comfortable with spending time alone, and it comes more externally than it does internally, whether that's within yourself and with God as a
Mhm,
believer.
mhm,
um yeah, it's definitely lonely. I think my loneliness switched at some point to having solitude and it being rejuvenating and something that was special, not this scary thing. I think for a long time being alone was scary to me.
mhm,
But just coming to a place in my life where not only did I accept myself and in the characteristics and the personality that God gave me,
mhm,
and the gifts and all that stuff, and actually seeing myself clearly, seeing me as God sees me instead of this warped version of me that negative people in my life had painted me to be and
mhm.
who I ended up believing. It was like being brainwashed. It became something that was a blessing.
Yeah,
And really and truly, for me, the Spirit of God has helped there be a balance. I think it can, if there's unhealthiness there, it can become isolation, not
mhm,
solitude, but
mhm.
isolation. Maybe not aloneness, but isolation.
Right.
So there's definitely a balance, but
Wow.
um, that is my answer.
Great. Thank you, Jen.
You're
That's
welcome.
some great answers. So, I think some of these answers are good. Look for another person and or belief system to fill our internal void. Do we tend to sacrifice our identity when our situation leads us to feel lonely? Does that work? No, no, I don't think it works. Uh, in my estimation, you need to work on who you are and work on the reason why you feel lonely. Um, as it's stated in being in a group and you can still feel lonely. What is that? Is that about the other people or is it about you? And that's a question I'm
That's a
asking.
great question.
What is it about you that feels lonely in a group of people? Is it because you're not able to reach out? Is it because you're afraid that other people, just like several have mentioned, because you're afraid that you're going to put yourself out there and no one's going to respond? But if you never do that, how are you ever going to find out if you never put yourself out there? So to me, it's a speaking for myself, it's about me. What am I willing to do to change this? If I'm feeling lonely, what can I do to change it?
Yeah.
I can work on it in myself, just like everything else. You can't work on other people. You can't make anyone else change. You can only work on you.
Yeah.
So, and that's not in a egotistical, selfish way, but in a way that if you're feeling lonely, working on your issues, just like Jen said about solitude, thinking about yourself and thinking of your own issues, things that you need to deal with. But it's the same thing if you're in a place of being lonely. Um, Being able to change loneliness to solitude. And Jen was saying somewhere along the line it changed from loneliness to solitude. But I would add to that and say that's because you did the work on yourself. You
Yeah.
changed it. I mean, yes, God worked through you and in you, yes, to make those changes, but you had to be responsible to respond to that.
Yeah.
You worked on it. You reached out to Glenn and myself. You were willing to take it a step further and to move forward in your life. That's what changed it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That changed it from loneliness to solitude. Yeah, so I don't think these other things work. Belief system. Um, a belief system can be beneficial to you, but you can still have a belief system and still be
And
lonely.
be lonely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
can find another person, look for another person. You find another person and you're with them. And if it's not the right kind of interaction, you can still be lonely, especially if it's just surfacey stuff.
Yeah. And that used to be me trying to fill that loneliness with relationships.
Right.
And it lasts for a little bit, but then
Mhm.
it's again, it's external.
You
Um,
always end up with yourself. You'll always end up back with yourself if
yeah.
the loneliness is an internal issue. If that's where the issue is, you always end up back in the same place. That's my take.
Yeah. And I love what Glenn wrote about, do we tend to sacrifice our identity when our situation leads us to feel lonely? I kept modifying myself and becoming smaller and censoring myself in my past marriage.
Right.
Part of it was because I was trying to connect with my husband at the time, and I
Mhm,
felt like all the things that made up who I
mhm.
was was repelling him. It was the strangest thing. It seemed at first in the beginning of the relationship, it's what it being me, it was what attracted him to me, but then somewhere along the way, it was like he was just disgusted, and so I I just started modifying myself and censoring myself,
Yeah.
trying to figure out how do I connect with this person.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to like it when I cry. He doesn't
Right.
seem to like it when I feel for other people and want to help them.
Mhm.
He doesn't seem to like that I light up or am more interested in relationships and spending
Right.
time together than
Mhm.
being on the road and spending all this money we don't have and
Right.
work all the time.
Mhm.
So and that even in itself, if you're abandoning who you are, what the fabric of what makes you you, I mean, that even in itself can make you feel even more alone.
Sure.
Because then for me, my identity started to become the person I was with. I
Right.
started morphing into the person I was with instead of having this healthy connection with myself and who I was internally.
Yeah.
And then the person that I was morphing into didn't want to be around me. It seemed like he hated me.
Right.
I just, and so then I'm like, okay, I'm with this person. I'm married to this person who I'm supposed to be connected with. And we are so far beyond being connected. It's like the antithesis of being
Yeah.
connected.
Right.
And I don't know who I am anymore. I've just been erased. I've allowed
Yeah.
myself to be erased. I've erased myself to try to fit into this peg that he seems to want me to fit into so that we can connect, but but there's still no connection. Even, my relationship with God and being in fellowship and going to church, he started to hate that. He started to hate, so it's just everything. It was just awful.
Yeah.
And then it was even more alone. So that definitely wasn't the answer. I can
Right.
look back now and realize, okay, I did myself even more of a disservice, and even the people around me, by censoring myself and by modifying myself to try to, um, just connect, to not
Hmm.
feel alone.
Yeah.
So,
And I understand why you do that. I believe that it's in us to connect, that
yeah,
we're made to have these connections and we don't have them. Sometimes we'll do whatever we can do to create them. But obviously, as you're saying, what you did didn't work because you're creating a false self during that time, creating a false self to fit in with what someone else expected you to be. And I think you've proved that that doesn't work. It doesn't
no,
work to you have to be who you are, and the
yeah,
right people will appreciate that. The right
yeah.
people will,
And the right people do.
yeah, the right
And
people.
I love when Glenn has talked about, when I first met Glenn, it was just so bizarre to me that he's like, if people don't like you, whatever, screw them,
Yeah,
move
exactly,
on.
exactly.
I have been in a place my entire life that I don't even I couldn't wrap my mind around that.
Yeah,
But the people pleasing, the goodist in me, the perfectionist,
yeah,
was someone who had such a horrible time. Like if I found out someone didn't like me, it would keep me up at nights,
right.
you know? And now with the self-acceptance thing and just celebrating who God created me to be,
Mm,
embracing it, um, there can be rejection. I can put myself out there, like I was mentioning earlier, and open up to someone, and they not respond and me still be okay and
yeah,
move on and know that the right people that I come along with, good example, you and Glenn, when you open up or reach out, they're going to respond, and that's awesome.
yeah.
But your I don't know, stability and foundation isn't connected to that. It's
Mm,
still built up by it, but it's not
sure.
before it. Just gosh, I felt like the world was going to end if people
Yeah,
didn't respond.
right. Yeah, you're in a very different place, and I'm glad that. Well, I'm not glad that you went through what you did, but with everything with your ex, you're able to appreciate a relationship where you are able to be yourself, and you don't have to change to be something that I want you to be.
Yeah.
You just work on you. That's the
Yep.
only thing that you need to do. Work on what you who you want to be.
Yeah. I don't
And
have to be a chameleon
no,
anymore.
no, absolutely not.
Thank
Bef-
God.
Before I get to Glenn, just a couple comments before they scroll up. John said, "Now that is interesting, Cripps," and in reference to the Al-Anon meetings, I believe. Now that is interesting, Cripps. I thought about sitting in those meetings. Last time I was in church was 3 years ago. Was thinking of finding one of those group meetings. I would definitely suggest it, John. I don't know what your situation is with dealing with alcoholism in your family, but those meetings, and I've been to more than one kind, so it wasn't just this singular meeting that I went to. They're pretty much the same all over the country, and very different than Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, it's the same group, it's in the same family, but it's more dealing with people that have been affected by it. And generally, my experience in all these different groups has been that people are willing to share openly from a deep place. So that's a good idea to do that. And then Janet says, Jen, I think music can help us fill during times alone when we just reflect and have solitude. It's very important, in my opinion, to choose music very carefully, as it is like food to our bodies. That's a good
Mhm.
point, Janet.
Yeah.
Jalen says, I don't know if this makes sense to you, Jen. If you believe there is a Satan, then he hates God's creation. It makes sense why we hear negative. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Janet says, perhaps we can help. This is a good comment, Janet. Perhaps we can help set the atmosphere for people to open up. A walk in the woods together, a hands-on project, being around a campfire or an indoor fireplace, then music, like I said above. That's good.
Yeah.
That's That's a good
Yeah,
suggestion.
sometimes you can't just sit down face to face with coffee and just dive
Right.
in. That can be intimidating. There's actually a term for that. My mom has a psychiatrist friend that she goes to the beach with, and she calls it side by side
Hmm.
conversation. It's just so much more comfortable, and
Hmm.
usually it's more men. But I think a lot of people, when you're driving on a road trip and you're not facing each other and
Hmm.
it's intimidating, it's just a little bit
Yeah.
easier to open up. And
Sure.
same with what Janet said about doing activities,
Sure.
doing things together. It's just a little bit easier.
Sure. And then Janet finishes up by saying, Jen, yes, because your ex was not able to love like you do, so he despised it. That's a good point.
I would agree.
Um, okay, so we'll go to Glenn now on this last one. So what do we do, Glenn? Look for another person or belief system to fill our internal void? Do we tend to sacrifice our identity when our situation leads us to feel lonely? Does that work? What do you think?
I'll just go back one to the situational loneliness, which I think is about lessons. I think in each one of those, say loss or grief, the lesson there is that maybe we need to consider carefully how we treat people and interact with them while they're still alive, and not after they've gone do we then have feelings of guilt. So I think it's
Right,
Yeah, or
important that
regret.
or
right,
regret, absolutely, yeah, for sure. Relationship breakdown, there's a lesson there. Communication issue, another lesson about how to maybe communicate better from your point of view. Lack of options and financial constraints. All of those things are life, and when a lot of people see loss or grief as negative, I find it difficult to be in a loss or grief place when someone who's like my dad or my mum have lived a full life. I've interacted with them wonderfully while they're alive. I mean, what have I really got to grieve about when I know that they don't have any pain, they are in a better place, and my life has been enhanced 100% by having known them. So I
That's
think,
awesome.
yeah,
yeah, yeah, I think we can very easily make it a negative, but I think there's a lot of positives that are well contained within those things. So what do we
sure,
do? Do we look for another person? I might have once.
yeah,
The belief system was irrelevant to me. Do we sacrifice our identity? Oh, I've done it. It
yeah,
doesn't work categorically. I can say that it does not work and it can never work.
yeah,
And but I think in order to find that it doesn't work, it's almost like you need to do it and see that it doesn't work. It's very easy for someone to tell you that it doesn't work, but once you go through it, or does that hit home with a baseball bat on the
Yeah.
head type scenario?
right,
And
right.
I was thinking of what Jen said. I'll just add one thing. If anyone out there thinks that Jen did this easily,
Right.
I think they need to think again. This what Jen did was concerted months and months and months and years of
Yeah.
hard yards and hard work and self
Yes.
reflection. It's not a 5 minute thing where you just turn your life around. No, no, no.
Right.
So,
Right.
so Jen, hats off to you. Respect 100%
Yeah.
Thanks,
for what you've
Glenn.
done. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Glenn, for sharing. We had a comment from the chat saying that you sound far away. So next time you talk, if you could try to get a little closer to the mic and make sure people are able to understand you, because they do want to know what you have to say is important. They want to be able to hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so the next part is this is not a question but a comment. The other part of our equation tonight is personal loneliness, that caused by our fundamental view of self and how the world works for each of us. And then the quote, sometimes I don't understand it, taking this life for granted. Everything we've been handed, everyone lonely inside. Yeah, I think loneliness is a huge issue. I think it happens to a lot of people all over the world and even different cultures. Um, I know that, like in China, there's huge big cities in China. There's billions of people, but people feel lonely, because there's that lack of interaction. So, what are some of the factors that come into play? And there's several things mentioned. The first one being frightened of the future because of our past failures. I'll just
Breaking out the big guns.
talk about each one. Being frightened of the future because of our past failures. Now, speaking personally, I've struggled with this because of things that I've failed. Whether in certainly I went through a divorce, and that was a difficult thing for me. And I've shared before already that when that happened, I thought, well, that's it. That's the only chance I had, and it failed. I failed. And I remember Glenn saying, I don't like that you're calling it a failure, because it's not. It's not a failure. Each life experience, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, Glenn, here, so you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but he's basically saying that you learn from your experiences, so don't refer to it as a failure, because you can learn from it and move forward and not make the same mistakes. And he was absolutely correct about that.
Yeah.
But at the time, I did feel like it was a failure. I was quote unquote frightened to move forward, and I wasn't at that time. I wasn't willing to try again. I was just like, oh well, that didn't work. I'm done. And frankly, I when Jen came along, just on a friendship level, I was interested in being friends with people. That didn't go away, but I did go through a period of time of because of my failure of isolating, and I did it for a long time. I focused on work, and I mean, I had to work constantly, and in that, I was around a lot of people. I drove for Lyft and Uber, which is, for those of you that don't know, is a ride share. It's like kind of like driving a cab, except it's you're doing your personal vehicle. I'm sure everyone knows about that. So I did get something out of the interactions with people, but these are single serving friendships. You meet the person once, and they're in your vehicle for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then they go off to their life and you go off to yours, and that's it. Now, to me, part of that, there was something fun in that, of getting to know someone for a short period of time, then you never talk to them again. But ultimately, I don't think that's what we want as people. I think we want longer relationships, and this can be a hard thing when we failed in the past. It can be very easy to not put yourself out there because of that failure. It's certainly something that happened to me. So, what do you think about that one? Being frightened of the future because of our past failures, Jen?
um, the future of my past. I'm gonna get really deep.
Okay,
The
you're in a good
future,
place for it, Jen.
the future of my past has been painted and pretty much laid out by past failures. Um, I know you and I have had many conversations where we've talked about, wondering where we would be if we hadn't been so afraid to fail.
Wow. Yeah.
And I've had many conversations with Glenn, and it's one of those wonderful things he has said that has stuck in my craw. Because I wasn't outrightly taught growing up that making mistakes and failing was bad. It was
Right.
kind of like insidious, and I don't think my parents did it maliciously, but even down to the disciplining when I made mistakes with chores, the way it was carried out and the way discipline was carried out, it just made me believe that making a mistake was not okay. It was unacceptable. Something was wrong with me that I couldn't do it perfectly. And it created in me a young adult that just was terrified of making mistakes. And instead of seeing mistakes as and failures as stepping stones
Yeah.
to growth. Gosh, and I don't know how many of you have done research on, um, all kinds of people that have been successful in their own goals and their own life with being authors or artists or people that have failed and failed and failed and kept trying. And they got to the point where they are because of all the failures. They learned, so many different ways how not to make a light bulb or,
Right.
other things. Um, no, I don't think anybody really sits down the first time and gets it right, or I
Right.
think that's very rare. Um, so being frightened of the future because of past failures, yeah, it finally now at like 40, I'm realizing and embracing the idea of failing in my trying and not being so afraid of it.
Right.
So that's great.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's setting that fear aside, and I think you said some really poignant things there. We all fail. We all make mistakes in life. None of us is perfect. So it's the proverbial brushing yourself off, getting up again. When you fall off the horse.
Yeah.
And that's happened to me. I did fall off a horse, and I did not get up and brush myself off. Well, I did, but I didn't get back on the horse for a long time. I didn't. Ride horses. I prefer to have something I can control. Not an animal that can jerk. Just
Yeah.
run off. Prefer a motorcycle or a ATV. Myself. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, being frightened of the future. So I commented on that, and you commented, Jen. So what do you think about that one? Being frightened of the future because of our past failures. What do you think, Glenn?
100% agree with what each of you said. I've been through it. I know what it feels like. It's scary.
Yeah.
But you ultimately, at the end of the day, have got a choice. You either sit where you are or you take the risk.
Hmm.
It's really that straightforward, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing for sure, if you don't take the risk, you know where you're going to be in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
So you've got a choice. I didn't want to be where I was, so I did it. And
Yeah.
yeah, just like you guys, took
Yeah.
the risk. Yeah,
Yeah.
stuff it up. So what?
Yeah.
Try again.
Well, put yourself out there, because if you don't, just like you said, Glenn, you'll be in the same place 10
You
Yeah.
years.
will.
Well, and
Stuck.
some people find peace in that, security and peace, and you know,
Yeah.
but then there's regret
Well, you get used to
sometimes.
it.
Yeah.
You can grow accustomed to your loneliness for sure. And then
Yeah.
at that point, the more you stay in the loneliness, I think the more difficult it is to get out of it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. And going back to something I meant to comment on when Glenn was talking about, like not waiting to the end before someone passes away or you don't have any more opportunity. I think that's very important. When my mom died suddenly, there's no long-term illness with her. She just one day she was alive, the next day she was gone. I am so grateful that our relationship was much better over the past 7-8 years of her life, and that I said to her, "I love you, Mom." I shared with her my feelings, and didn't wait, because I cannot imagine the regret that I would feel if I hadn't done that. And I make it a point to tell people that I care about as frequently as I can that I love them and I appreciate them. So that's very important. Okay, the next one is lack of honest interaction with self and others. I think Jen shared some good things about that already, about being a chameleon and changing to fit in with other people, and
Yeah.
to be more likable to them, and how it turned out for her. I think that if you're not interacting honestly first with yourself,
Yep.
that's the most important thing. If you're lying to yourself about who you are, or you don't know who you are, and you're not making any effort to find out who you are, then it's just going to fall flat with others too. I
Yeah.
mean,
I think people can sense it.
mhm.
Like, I look back at some memories from like high school, and I'm like, oh man, even me looking back at my own self, I'm like, wow, that was pretty obvious. Oh, geez.
I like to think I would have pulled it out of you.
Aw.
I would have still seen your. I believe I would have seen your true self, and I would be like,
Aw.
okay, quit it, Jen,
Cut it out. Be
cut
yourself.
it out. Yeah, be yourself. Yeah, this can be hard to do. I mean, being honest, reacting or interacting honestly with others. You start with yourself first.
Yeah.
That goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you're lonely, the best thing, in my opinion, to do is work on that in yourself first, and then it opens you up to be able to interact better with others.
Yeah.
So, short answer for this one, Glenn. What do you think? Lack of honest interaction with self and others. How do you feel about that one?
Same as you guys. You covered it particularly well. I thought, yeah, if you can't be honest with yourself, how do you be honest with somebody else? Right.
Right.
It's just like digging a hole, jumping in it, and having someone fill in on top of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. You're
Yeah.
buried, mate. You're
Yeah.
buried.
That's it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. Next one. The belief that having superficial friends and lovers is loneliness insulator. Yeah, we know that's not true.
Wait,
And
can you explain this? Because what does Glenn mean by loneliness insulator?
it keeps you insulated, the loneliness, if you kind of stay at arm's length and you surround yourself with superficial friends and lovers. It is keeps you from loneliness.
Okay, I didn't know if he meant insulates the loneliness inside or outside, but he's saying outside then, like away from you, not close to you.
Yeah, yeah. So it prevents your loneliness insulator, keeps you insulated
Gotcha.
from being lonely by having superficial friends and lovers.
Okay, gotcha.
Superficial friends are they do nothing to keep you from being lonely because again, it's superficial is the surfacey thing that we were referring to earlier.
Yeah.
It's not deep enough to make any long lasting impact. I've had these types of friends in the past,
Me
superficial
too.
friends. They're good for certain things, like I would say, like drinking buddies, for instance. I would have
Karaoke.
karaoke buddies. That's not exactly what I was thinking of, but yeah, you could have a superficial karaoke buddy. They're like they're only good to pick out songs and to sing karaoke with. I'm calling. I put it in my speed dial. Superficial karaoke friend. But the overall point, though, is surrounding yourself with superficial people. It may seem like that'd be beneficial. Well, again, at least I'm going out and I'm socializing. At least I'm having these relationships. But wait till you get into a real bind. Who are you going to call when that
Ghostbusters.
happens? You're going to call, yeah. Are you going to call your superficial karaoke friend? No. They're not gonna
Mm-mm.
be there for you. They'll be like, "See you at the bar, and we'll be singing some Fleetwood Mac," you know? Yeah, it doesn't work, and it doesn't work as a loneliness insulator. You can, as we said earlier, you can still be just as lonely in a group as you can be just by yourself. So
Yeah.
I don't think that works. What do you think, Jen? Superficial karaoke friends?
I think it can work for a short time because it kind of keeps you busy and distracted.
Mhm.
But when you were chatting, I was picturing, say you've got a ton of superficial friends and even some lovers, and all of a sudden something hits your life that's pretty serious, like getting cancer or having a parent die. And in your head, you're going through this list of all of these friends that you have, or even
Mhm.
flipping through your phone contacts
Yeah.
and going through all these names
Mhm.
and not feeling comfortable with talking to any of them about something serious,
Right.
or feeling
Oh, good
like
point.
you could reach out to them and they would be there and be comfortable
Yeah.
with being there for you on a deeper level with something serious,
Mhm.
and how lonely that would feel.
Right.
Um, gosh,
It's super lonely,
yeah.
I would imagine. What do you think, Glenn? The belief that having superficial friends and lovers isn't a loneliness insulator.
I think you're covering these very, very, very well. I've nothing for me to say.
I'll
Yeah.
ask you first. The next one I'll ask you
Oh,
first, and then
oh,
that way you can.
oh, I've set myself up there, but you're doing a great job. I'm on your page. Yeah. No, in some ways, I think it exacerbates loneliness because you come away from those connections with the superficial, and then what are you left with? It becomes just an ever-present cycle of momentary distraction back to emptiness. And of course, I think it
Right.
just gets harder and harder and harder the longer this goes on
Sure. Sure
because
it does.
you're still empty, aren't you? You haven't really gained anything.
Yeah,
No.
hasn't
So
changed
very,
anything.
very tough. Well done, guys.
All right. Great. Thanks, Glenn. So I'll let you answer this one first. So there's a medical issue that should be investigated. For example, depression. There's a medical issue that should be investigated, such as depression.
Absolutely, I think there are genuine cases where people can feel depressively because there can be a chemical imbalance or something going on.
Sure.
It's something
Sure.
that they can't no matter how much they take to heart,
Mhm.
and feel responsible for it, may be well out of their control or well out of their, circumstances to do anything about it.
Yeah,
So in those cases, we urge that if it's overwhelming, that you seek professional guidance.
right,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
So in reference to my ex, she had that. She had what I would term and what she termed as clinical depression. She was aware of it. But the thing is she did nothing about it. And so the problem didn't go away. It just stayed right where it was the whole time I knew her. She went through the motions. Like, we went to counseling sessions, and I found out later that she looked at it as marital counseling, and that's not at all what it was. I was there to support her, for her to deal with her depression, and that's not the way she saw it. So she didn't do anything to deal with it. So um, if you have this, just like Glenn said, if it's at a certain level, you can try to deal with it on your own, but a lot of times it's going to be beneficial to get outside help.
Yeah, get some help.
And there is help out there. So many people in the world are depressed, and there are books that can be read. There are counselors. There are people that focus specifically on depression and anxiety. The Bible is replete with ways to deal with these things. And what it all comes down to is being loving. And um, as we've talked about on many episodes, that love starts with you being loving of yourself, because of the way God made you. So that can help with depression. If you hate yourself or you think you're a piece of crap,
You're
as
not
we
going to go get help.
before, you're not going to get help. You won't even think that you need help based on, well, why would I? If I'm a piece of crap, then why would I deserve help anyway?
Yeah. Yeah. I used to think I was a piece of crap, and I was so detached from my own needs that it was even scarier. I remember getting to a place, I want to say it was like in 2016, where I was so sad, and and literally in the place that I was in, I kept saying in my mind, I don't know why I'm so sad.
Yeah,
And the fact that I didn't know, which it was glaringly, I can look back now and see glaringly obvious why I was sad.
yeah,
Um, but I couldn't stop crying.
right,
I had like a couple days where I couldn't, and I went and saw my family care practitioner and just broke down.
right.
But it's scary being that detached from yourself to where you're thinking, I have no reason to be sad. So why am I this sad? And for there to be glaring reasons as to why.
It's interesting that back then, when you were in it, you didn't see a reason for you to be sad. Of course, you were being told by your ex that, oh, you have a job and a life that people would kill for.
Yeah.
He's telling you that, and
Oh,
you're
yeah. Over and
unhappy.
over and over and over.
Yeah. It's
So,
interesting that sometimes when you're in it, you can't see it. That's
yeah.
interesting. Okay. Lack of understanding of what a healthy relationship looks like. This one is huge.
Yeah.
Lack of understanding of what a healthy relationship looks like. What is a healthy relationship? We've talked about this kind of many times with different topics. In craving a healthy relationship, I don't know how much we've described what it is, but we've certainly described elements of it, like being
Yeah.
honest with yourself, learning that you're not a piece of crap, recognizing that working on yourself is important so that you can follow what the Bible says, and loving God with everything and love your neighbor as yourself,
Yeah.
knowing that God made you to be a good creation, a good, healthy
A
person,
unique individual.
unique individual, unique as a snowflake. So, healthy relationship is one that starts with your relationship. In my opinion, if you're a believer, it starts with your relationship with God first and foremost, and then branches out from there so that you can fulfill that command, knowing that God created you for a reason, and knowing that you are worthy. You
Yeah.
you are worth working on. You're worth loving. You're worth empathy. You're worth grace. Otherwise, God wouldn't have sent his son. He wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
So because he cares for you, you can learn how to care for yourself. And in that, you can have a healthy relationship. For people that don't believe in that, you're still capable of being healthy by working on yourself, working on issues that you see in your life, whether it's the way you treat yourself and then
Hmm.
others. All of those things can be worked on. To me, how would I describe a healthy relationship? I would describe it as being open and authentic and honest with yourself first, and then you are able to do that with others. It's introspection is necessary. Continually working on who you are
Yeah.
and working on your relationships. To me, that's what healthy is. What do you think, Jen? Lack of understanding of what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of us that weren't taught
Right,
growing up what a healthy relationship is.
right,
I was in a relationship that I thought was fairly healthy. There was no encouragement, there was no affirmations, words of affirmation, there was no
mhm,
touch going on,
right,
whether it be holding hands or putting your hand on your spouse's shoulder as you walk by, or
mhm,
down to intimacy.
mhm,
Um, there was major neglect, emotional neglect,
right,
financial abuse, sexual abuse. It was so. And I'm shocked when I look back and think, a lot of this stuff started from the very beginning. And stuff like this can happen in friendships too, not the physical stuff per se. But
sure,
the fact that I didn't see the red flags from the beginning is shocking.
yeah,
And it's because I had no role model of a healthy relationship. I didn't know what that looked like. And in that particular relationship, there were echoes of what I grew up with. Anger. Anger was normal. Raging outbursts were normal to me. Not getting compliments, not getting encouragement. I'm not saying that's all, but it's a part of you finding yourself. It's a part of connecting as people, seeing
mhm,
each other, being acknowledged
mhm,
by each other. There was so much lacking, and
yeah,
I think we can get ourselves into situations, friendships or relationships that are not healthy.
mhm,
And I'm telling you, when I met you and Glenn, I it was so shocking to me, some of the things that you guys talked about. It was like light bulbs going off
yeah,
when it came to healthy friendships, even being direct, being
mhm,
upfront and honest. And not that I was going around trying to be a liar. It's just I had spent so much time denying my own truth, and to the point where, this is going to sound drastic, but this is how it was. Every day I was saying yes to things, and in my mind I was saying, no, I don't want to do this.
right,
But in my words that were coming out of my mouth, I was saying yes to stuff. And in my head, there were times I was screaming in my head that, no, I do not want to do this.
right,
And constantly, minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year of denying my own voice, my inner
yeah,
voice.
yeah,
um it's just so damaging, and I just had no idea like that, how unhealthy that was. And so to be in a relationship where it's safe to like if you ask me something and I say no in our relationship now, we laugh because
yeah,
it's just such a delight to be able to be honest with one another and be a safe
yep,
place, that's not, there's not defenses up, it's not going to be taken wrong. We know each other's heart and
uh-huh,
the intention behind it.
yep,
So I think being educated on what healthy looks like is really
mhm,
important, because then we can, not that we do, we can be attracted to unhealthy relationships, and it can
sure,
definitely add to the loneliness.
sure.
So it's a long answer, sorry.
One no, no, that don't be sorry. You mentioned damage. Can you talk just for a minute about what kind of damage that living like that causes?
Oh, I
What if
didn't trust myself at all.
right,
To the point where we would be driving on the highway, and before I, this is going to sound really drastic, but before I turned my blinker on,
uh-huh,
before I switched lanes, before
uh-huh,
I took a turn, I was always looking to him to tell me what
wow,
to do. It was that bad. It had gotten so crazy that I was even questioning my own
Oh,
actions, my own
God.
thoughts. Just, yeah, damage to the point where, and I mentioned before earlier about you feeling erased, your own trust in yourself. Because I mean, I know as a believer we trust God fully more than anybody, but there is logic that He gives us, and there's a certain amount of trust that I think we develop within ourselves, to make everyday decisions like
Sure.
turning on your blinker or
Yeah. Yeah. Everyday decisions. Yeah. That's a good one.
um, uh, it's damaging because you're ignoring. For me, I was ignoring myself, and that
Yeah.
it just ripped me of my identity of being a person, being a human. It just I felt like a non-human. I felt like a robot,
Yeah.
and
He,
it's very
he,
damaging.
he brainwashed you.
Yeah,
He, I mean, what you just shared, looking to him to use your blinker. I mean, that's brainwashing.
yeah, it's
That's
bad.
cult like brainwashing, in my opinion. I mean, you allowed it to happen. I'm not taking
Yeah,
away the part where you allowed it to happen, but oh
yeah.
my
But I
gosh,
thought I was stupid.
yeah,
So why not have somebody swoop in and tell me what to do? Because I was afraid of failure. So
right,
if somebody else is making my decisions for me,
mhm,
it sort of in a really warped, twisted way takes away the fear of me making a mistake, because if he's telling me what to do and it fails,
right,
then I'm not the one on the line that's making the mistake. He is.
right,
But it was
yeah,
still my fault. It was still
right,
twisted in the end to be my fault. So that was
right.
lovely.
Thanks.
Just,
I appreciate you answering that. It
yeah.
was just something you said. I wanted to tell the listeners like what that meant, damage. So thank you. All right, Glenn. Lack of understanding of what a healthy relationship looks like. What do you think of this one?
First, Jen, that was heavy going.
Yeah,
What you
that's
just
good.
said, that's brilliant. I think I hope people were listening to what you just said, because I think it's really important.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, there is a lack of understanding. I think if we could just sit for a minute and look at all the unhealthy things that each of us do, and take them out of the equation and say, well, what have we got left? Is that healthy? Well, it's probably a good start, I would think. So
Yeah.
I would be thinking there is a fundamental lack of knowledge, if you want to call it that, of what healthy behaviour and healthy
yeah,
relationships look like out there.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think more often than not, when we look at the marriages and the relationships around us, or you try and look at them objectively, how many of those would you think are healthy in a proportion? I couldn't even get to 25%, I don't think.
Hmm.
So I don't
I
know.
would if that 25% might even be high. I don't know. It might be high. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate that one. So just a couple more to get through, and then we have a couple more questions, and we'll be able to
Can I can I say one more thing?
well, of
I
course.
just feel the need to say this. I don't know if there's somebody in the audience or listening to the playback that feels like saying no is unloving.
Right.
Um, it's not. My mom, I kind of learned from her codependency, feeling responsible for other people's feelings, and it's very difficult to get unenmeshed from that. But she too learned later on in life that it's okay to say, "Let me think about it,"
Yeah.
because I was a yes woman, and my mom
Yeah.
was too, and I learned from her. Even gosh, even down to feeling like it's not Christian to say no, and then even wanting to be a yes person because you're in a place of wanting to be liked or wanting to be loved or wanting to be accepted. But it is okay to say no. It really, really is. It's
Yeah.
healthy to say no, every once in a while. It's very
Mhm.
healthy to say yes sometimes too.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to add that in there.
Sure. Thanks. Okay. The thought of intimacy and associated vulnerability is too unsafe. The thought of intimacy and associated vulnerability is too unsafe. Yeah, as we were discussing earlier, because of the way people are and running into someone that's going to take advantage of you being vulnerable with them or transparent with them, yeah, it makes it scary and it makes it feel unsafe. But as we said, if you don't take the risk, you're going to be in the same place that you are now. If you're dealing with loneliness, you have to take a risk. Without risk, there's no reward, and that is a cliche saying, but it's cliche because it's true. Um, so as much as it might be unsafe, and it is, it's a reality that it can be unsafe. You have to put yourself out there. So Jen is sharing that when she ran across us, that a light went off, and she immediately put herself out there, but it was still a risk. She didn't know us, especially in the beginning. We could have been narcissistic. We could have taken advantage of her transparency. We didn't, of course, but it could have turned out a completely different way. So I'm saying ultimately it had to be a decision that she made on her part to take a risk.
Yeah.
It was a risk. But again, if you don't take the risk, there's no chance of reward. So as much as it might feel unsafe, you have to try with
And the,
someone.
yeah. And
You
the
have,
times that it succeeds, it's like, oh my gosh, it was so worth putting myself out there.
yeah,
And to think that some of the friendships that we have that are the most precious, that we may not have them if we hadn't had put ourselves out there and taken a risk.
right, right. When I think of even how we met, I mean, the chances of that are astronomical.
Yeah.
But you took a risk to join a certain Facebook group. That was a risk, and then communicating within that group was a risk.
Yeah.
Talking openly about deeper topics, it's a risk there, because there's always people out there that are going to disagree with you, and they're going to try to make you feel like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
But without that attempt to do so, to change your situation, there's not going to be any chance of ever getting out of it. So, and intimacy is an important thing. Again, just like I believe that we're created to have connections, we're created to have intimate connections, not just surface, superficial relationships, but to have deep relationships with people.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And being vulnerable is hard. I mean, Jen, you shared about, being in a church situation, and sharing your brokenness and sharing what you're struggling with, and there was no response to that.
It's just,
I mean, I've had the same thing. I've shared in small groups certain things, and there's no good response. But there are, like I said earlier, there are groups out there of people that are doing this. They are being vulnerable. They are being transparent. They're being authentic.
yeah.
So it's a matter of it being important enough to you, despite it feeling unsafe or difficult, of doing what it takes to work on that and get to that
Yeah.
point. What do you think, Jen? The thought of intimacy and associated vulnerability is too unsafe. What do you think?
I keep going back to the question because I'm trying to think of the context that we're asking these things.
Yeah, just so you know, these
Um,
are more statements. I'm kind of asking questions about each one.
what are some of the factors that come into play
Yeah,
with loneliness? Okay. Yeah, it's funny the times that you've talked about your childhood, I feel very similar where I started out younger as a
yeah,
younger child being really open and
yeah.
like kind of ballsy when it came to
Hmm.
sharing and stuff. And then I got burned a couple times and it like a turtle back in its shell kind of a thing. Um, and it's been through my own growth and self acceptance that's made my head come back out of the shell
Awesome,
and rip
awesome.
the shell off completely. No, the top one's off, the bottom one's still there. Um,
Right, right.
so,
They're protecting your
um,
soft underbelly. Yeah,
yeah, there you go. I completely understand how people can feel this way, that
sure.
just being very vulnerable and it feeling too unsafe. But I just go back to what you had said with the last question, or your answer to this question about it.
Right.
Um, the risk, it is a risk.
Yeah,
But when you find those people that are of like mind and heart, it's so worth it.
yeah,
And to think that there are other people out there that are also searching, that are also deep and want to be open and authentic and vulnerable, and they're looking for people just like you,
yeah,
that are willing to take the risk. And when we all walk around with our heads in our shells, the facade is that nobody's interested.
Yeah.
Everybody's just kind of self-focused and,
Yep.
not looking elsewhere to have
Mhm.
connection.
Yep.
When I think there probably are more people than we realize that want to have deeper connections with other people. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
welcome.
All right, Glenn. The thought of intimacy and associated vulnerability is too unsafe. What do you think about that one?
I think it's, I don't like it at all. I think it's the other way around, personally. I think it's the only safe way to go, because how do you ever find out or connect with someone on a similar level if you don't throw yourself out there and be vulnerable? And
Right.
so here I am. I am
Yep.
what I am. Take it or like me, or do you don't.
Yep.
I am an emotional person, an intimate person. I'm prepared to be vulnerable. Some people are going to say, "Well, you're an idiot, Glenn," and some people are going to say, "Oh, that's so wonderful." You're going to get a range of feedback, and the ones who don't come to you where you are move on
Yeah.
gratefully or graciously, and the ones that respond will stay. It's pretty
Yep.
easy. The connection's already made, but the longer you hold back, the less opportunity there is for people to show their true selves, and hence I think many connections that could be very fruitful tend to drift into the wind.
Right.
Sadly, yeah.
Good point.
Thank you.
I'll have you start with the next one. So we are stuck in a situation, that's in quotations. We are stuck in a situation and cannot see a way out. What about that one, Glenn?
Yeah, I can see that that is possible,
Yeah.
particularly if you are in a what you might call a lonely situation, even in a marriage or a relationship, but
Yeah.
you are constrained by factors. It could be, say, financial. You
Yeah.
don't have the money to jump in the car and go somewhere. You don't have the
Right.
money to set yourself up independently. You may want to do something, but you're or in incredibly difficult situation. You could be in an abuse situation, as been mentioned on here before.
Yeah.
What do you
Absolutely.
do? Do you have to pack 4 kids in the car and
Wow.
have to go somewhere and live in a park with no
Yeah.
running water, no electricity? I mean, there's always situations where you're thinking of the bigger picture, and you are
Yeah.
thinking of your children or whoever or whatever that may be, and it's tough. So
Yeah.
yes, being stuck, I think that's a very plausible situation. But there
Sure.
are others who have the opportunity, who say they're stuck in a situation, but in reality, they're using it as an excuse to
Oh,
do
I agree.
nothing. So
Right.
you've got to get to the truth.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, I would agree with what Glenn said. And there are situations, I think Glenn mentioned a few of them that would be tough. I'm glad that in my situation, I didn't have kids to have to deal with in different times of my life. I can only imagine how that might be stuck in a marriage, a bad marriage like Jen was, but she didn't have kids either. It doesn't mean that it's not difficult. It was still difficult for her to be
Yeah.
in that. I'm just saying that Glenn put it into perspective there for those of you out there listening that are in an abusive or bad situation, which is causing loneliness, and you can't see a way out. Yeah, it can be difficult. I would just say simply that whatever your situation is, there are steps that you can take. It may be difficult to find them. It may take some research, but there are ways that you can work on this loneliness thing, at least inside yourself, reaching out to people. But again, it does take a risk. What do you think, Jen? We're stuck in a situation and cannot see a way out.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what you guys said. I'll just say, but God.
Yeah, absolutely.
um, and there may be a lot of people that do not agree with this particular perspective or way of going about things, but I prayed on my face for 13 years for God to save my marriage. And I don't know 100% sure if it was the Spirit of God leading me to pray this specific prayer, but I mean, days before I prayed this, I was wanting to die.
Yeah.
Um, it was awful. Um, and I finally I don't know if it was courage. I'm not sure what it was, but I just felt led to pray that God would end my marriage. And what a stark contrast to go from 13 years of just begging God to, because I know God is able to do anything. And I never wanted to jump ship if, around the corner there was resolution or there
Mhm,
was reconciliation or a miracle of
mhm,
some kind.
mhm.
So that was huge for me, and he made a way. I let him know that I needed to see the green light to go from him, and it couldn't come from me. It couldn't come from someone else. Couldn't come from my parents or friends. It had to come from him because I needed to know that I know that I knew that I knew that I knew or know that it was him. It was
Mhm.
of him. And like I said, it might not be the most popular response because I think there are people that do believe. I mean, I believe God hates divorce,
Right.
but I know some people are a little more stringent with that. But
Sure.
he made a way for me to get out, and a huge part of it was him ripping the rose-colored glasses off of my face.
Yeah. In a heartbeat. You
Yeah,
know.
and it was the next day
Yeah.
that it happened. And it was showing me, like really, really showing me the person that I was with,
Yeah.
and that this person did not care about me one iota and actually wanted to harm to come to me.
Mhm.
And so I really believe that God can make a way, just like scripture says, where there just seems to be no way. I just felt like I was going to be stuck, and the only way out was death. What a horrible place to be.
Yeah, I agree.
But he came through, and he's amazing. God is amazing.
Amen. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing that. Okay. We're almost to the end of this, guys. Last one of these, this particular section. The loneliness as a way of life has been accepted, whether preferred or not. Loneliness as a way of life has been accepted, whether preferred or not. And this came up. I mentioned before that it gets easy if you're in that place of loneliness, and if you don't do something, I think it gets harder and harder to do anything about it. So this addresses that loneliness as a way of life. So this is the way you've been living for a long time, accepting the fact that you're loneliness. And I was in danger of doing that, accepting my isolation as a direct result of my failure in the marriage. But oh my gosh, just like Jen's talking about God having a different plan, he had a different plan for me, and he literally gave it to me. I just had to agree to show up, to show up for it, to be accepting of it. That's what I did, but I did nothing else. It just was something that happened. But you have to be in a place of like expectation, in my opinion, to expect something good to come up. I'm not talking about like naming it and claiming it, or speaking the words out there into the ether or anything like that. Just having an attitude of expectation, expecting that you can get out of this way of life. You don't have to stay in it. You can make decisions that help you get free of it. And there are people out there that are willing to help you. There are people out there that are caring and want to be of assistance to you, whatever that situation might be. What do you think? Loneliness is a way of life, Jen. They've accepted it, whether they prefer to or not. That's the reality of the situation.
Hmm.
I mean, you were lonely for 14 years.
Yeah, and I did get to a place where I accepted it.
Hmm.
Um, oh man, that's just not a good place to be.
Oh, I can imagine.
I think if I would have held on, and not even, I mean, because holding on to some of my autonomy or self identity or self love,
Right,
there was very little of it. So I don't
right.
think that would have helped. But if I would have known what I was dealing with and actually spent more time with God and more
Yeah,
time finding out who I was and who I wanted to be apart from this other person because I just was so
Ooh,
enmeshed with him.
ooh,
I think I would have fared a lot better. And I mean, don't
yeah,
get me wrong, I survived and it's a miracle that I'm
yeah,
not insane.
yeah.
It's
How
just a
many times
miracle.
have I told you that, Jen? Well, I
Yeah.
don't use the word insane, but I've told you several times. It's a
Cuckoo for
miracle.
Cocoa Puffs.
It's a
Um,
miracle that you're even able to be in a relationship with another person.
yeah.
It's a miracle. And not only that, but to do it well.
Yeah. But if I feel like I may have even gotten out sooner or just would have fared a lot better if I would have, had boundaries, said no, stopped just completely ignoring myself. I mean, it was just everything, my feelings, my emotions,
Right,
my spiritual walk, my
right,
health, I mean, it just was on and on and on. It just my goals and my
right.
dreams and talent and
Sure.
creativity and it's just on and on.
All of
So I feel like it would have been different, but I think it all played out the way it played out for a reason. And I think it'll take my lifetime and even beyond to understand fully,
it. Mhm.
why it played out the way it did and that God's got a purpose for all of it. Um, so
Amen. Thank you.
yeah.
All right, Glenn. Loneliness is a way of life. What do you think of that? They've accepted it, whether it's preferred or not, they accept it.
And I think some people do accept it. Accept it. I've had this chat with Sandra. I said, "Well, what happens if one of us dies tomorrow?" And we both agreed that neither of us is going to be lonely if the other
Right,
person is gone, because we've learnt to live within ourselves first.
mhm.
So therefore, you're going to miss the other person, but it's not going to
Sure.
destroy. It's not going to destroy you. It's not going to prevent you from, having a fruitful rest of your life. No.
Yeah.
So I think that's because each of us has said, well, the one thing that we do want is that the other can move on and
Right,
enjoy as much as possible the rest of your life. This is what you're there for. Go for it. Absolutely. So
right.
I agree. Some people have accepted it. Some people don't want to be there, and some others have a choice to do something about it. It's very convoluted. There's so many options, but in general, yeah, some people do accept it. Absolutely. I don't, because I'm not lonely to start with, so therefore it's not a relevant question. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah,
I know what it's like to feel lonely, and it's not good.
sure. Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate you
Thank you.
sharing that. Okay, we're almost to the end, guys. So the next part is so you have your SHIT together. You spend constant time in solitude. You've thought it all out, dealt with your past, have a healthy outlook, addressed all the questions, and yet you remain in a state of loneliness. Why? Why, if you've done all that, why would a person still be lonely? We'll start with Glenn on that one. This is a good question. This is the second to last question, Glenn. So, what do you think on this one? They've done all this stuff, healthy outlook, addressed all the questions, and yet they remain in a state of loneliness. Why do you think that could occur?
I think I answered my own question down further.
Okay.
I think it's that part of our humanity that really desires us to feel valued and appreciated, etc., etc.
Right.
And I think that it's sort of it's something that is required. Not necessarily all the time, but I think it's incredibly beneficial to our just feeling of ourselves. And
Mm.
yeah, I think that. Sorry, I just lost. I got distracted there.
Well, that's okay. That's okay.
No, cats. Uh,
Yeah, I was thinking it's Coco.
Coco,
Yeah,
cuckoo for
Coco the
Cocoa Puff.
mascot. He knows the show's about over, so it's time
Yeah,
for
it's
afternoon tea.
He's telling you
Yeah,
he's
so
lonely.
no, he's not lonely. He's hungry.
yeah.
Yeah, you get
So
it.
I do. Yeah. So the next part, what Glenn's referring to says, is there any person out there who can honestly say, I don't embrace the feelings of being valued, respected, appreciated, and acknowledged and loved by others? So, yeah, I believe it would be healthy to the above part to have a healthy outlook. You've asked all the questions. Um, you dealt with your past and all that and still feel lonely. Yeah, it seems like there's always work to be done on ourselves. There's always, as Jen said, a whole life. I don't think let me rephrase. I don't think you ever should stop working on this.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever arrive in a place where you just don't deal with these things anymore. At least you shouldn't. I want, as a person, I want to continue to grow and be better and better. The man I am today, 10 years from now, I hope that I'm much better than I am right now. I hope that I continue to grow and change and become a better husband and a better friend and a better brother. Um, I just want to improve. And with
Yeah.
that attitude, I think you have a chance of getting out of the loneliness and continuing to grow and continuing to reach out to other people. Take the risk. Um, you can change the situation you're in. Again, you can't change other people, but you can do that. And part of that is being valued, from yourself, valuing yourself, respecting yourself, appreciating yourself, and then you can be acknowledged and loved by others. If you, and as Jen said, people pick up on this. People pick up on whether you like yourself or not.
Yeah.
And again, we're not talking about self-absorbed here.
Yeah.
There's plenty of that out there. We're just talking about recognizing that you're not
And
at this.
that's not attractive either.
No,
That kind of self-absorbed.
no, it's not.
Nope.
What about you, Jen, on this one? This is the next to last question here. So, um, you've got
The
everything together. You've addressed all the questions. Um, can a person still be lonely?
this makes me think of people, and this is coming from my belief system,
Right,
that someone may not know God.
right.
Um, because you can do all the time of solitude and,
Hmm.
in my opinion,
Hmm. Yeah, it's your
thinking through
opinion.
everything and dealing with
Right.
your past and having a healthy outlook and addressing all these internal questions and yet still remain in a state of loneliness. I believe that there is um, a place in us that desires to know our creator, and that he wants to know us and he wants that relationship with us. And
Hmm. Absolutely.
I don't think anything in the world, in my opinion, that could fill that void,
Hmm.
that
God
that
shaped.
want.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It makes me think of that song from Bruce Almighty. You remember that song?
I don't know.
That God shaped hole in all of us.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
have to bust it out. Where's my
Thanks, Jen.
ukulele?
Yeah. Thank you.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah.
So, last one. Glenn says, I don't believe so, in reference to the above question. I don't believe so because it's part of our human condition. It's in our DNA, which I would agree.
I would
It's
agree with that too.
we're made to connect. We're made to be involved with other people, to have deep, abiding relationships and things like that. I don't believe isolation is part of the human condition. It shouldn't be. Um, Even animals get lonely. What does that say? If you have a dog or a cat and you leave for the whole day, well, especially a dog, when you get home, what happens? I've never seen another animal so excited to see a person when they come home after being gone all day. I mean, wagging the tail and jumping up on you and just, tongue lolling out, licking you and kissing you all over the face. This is an animal that's excited to see you. They do get lonely, and I'm sure you've heard stories of dogs that tear things up when their owner's gone. Why do they do that? Because they're lonely and they're mad that they're
Or cats that pee.
oh gosh, yeah, cats that pee. They're lonely and they're angry and they take it out on your shoes. That's what happens.
Or your laundry in the basket.
That's right. That's exactly right. Jen. Thank you. Yeah, so the root cause is right there. So we feel lonely when we feel this is very important. This is the last question, and we'll say goodnight. Um, we feel lonely when we feel nobody understands us or is prepared to make the effort to do so. That is the most profound question in this whole thing, in my opinion. Yeah, if we feel nobody understands us, we just want to be understood. We want someone to make an effort to get to know us, to be in a relationship with us. And if you have that, then you realize when you think of the way you lived before that that was what was lacking. I can tell you this, and this is being completely transparent, but I don't think anyone would accuse me of having a problem being transparent. I think probably I'm too transparent in some cases, at least publicly. But I'm in a relationship with a person who makes me thrilled that she pursues me and wants to get to know me better. It makes me value myself even more. Now, yes, I need to value myself aside from Jen, I do, but I'm still working on it. I'm working on it. But what I'm saying is that because of the way that she treats me and with love and empathy and caring, um, it does make me look at myself and say, "Wow, I this person is pulling all the stops, and she's making the effort to get to know me better and to understand me." That means everything to me, and I believe that's what we all want. We want a person to come alongside us and say, "Hey, you're worth getting to know. I want to get to know you." Now, I still go back to you need to do that for yourself. You need to see your own value. I'm just stating that when you find someone that does that as well, it heals you. It's healing. It makes up for all the loneliness, in my opinion. It makes up for all the times that I wished I'd had someone to turn to when I was isolating, when I was choosing to isolate, when I was struggling. I just wanted to reach out to someone and have them validate and say, "Yeah, what you're going through is hard, man. It's difficult." And that would have made all the difference. And now I do have someone that says that sees the things I struggle with and gives me a hug and says, you're strong enough to get through this. You're going to make it, and prayer is a big thing too. And I realize there are people listening that aren't believers, and I get that. But prayer is a huge thing. You have a God that loves you and created you to be in relationship with him, as Jen was saying. You have a part of you that desires that. And getting validation from him is greater than any kind of human validation. And knowing that he sent his son to reconcile us to him should be enough validation for you. So just, I would ask that you just keep that in mind. What do you think, Jen, on this last one? We feel lonely when we feel nobody understands us or is prepared to make an effort to do so.
Yeah. Um, I will be honest and say, and this makes me want to cry,
Okay.
but
You take your time, babe.
I don't recall meeting anybody until I met you and Glenn that truly wanted to know me
Mm,
um, on such a profound, deep level. And it's so incredibly touching and wonderful,
mm,
for lack of a better term. So,
sure.
and that's what I meant earlier when I was describing. I think for me, being in a place my entire life of not just wanting to know people on a deeper level, but wanting to be known and having all of these thoughts and wonderings and just living inside your head.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, overnight, it goes from that to meeting people that are just so open and want to talk about the things that it's almost like you've been talking to God or to yourself in your
yeah.
head for your entire life.
Yeah.
It's such a miraculous, wonderful, wonderful thing, and such a gift,
Yeah.
such a miracle. So, what was the question? I just
No, you're answering the question. We feel
okay.
lonely when we feel nobody understands us or is
Yeah,
prepared to make the effort to do so. And you're describing you meeting us and feeling for the first time that there was someone that wanted to get to know you and make the effort to do so.
yeah. I think it is an amazing gift
Hmm.
to give somebody, to acknowledge them, to see them, to hear them,
Yeah.
to validate them.
Uh,
Um, what an amazing gift, because we're not all the same. We are all very incredibly different. Not only has God made us different in the way we look and our emotions and our personalities and just everything, our experiences are all different. There's no two people the same, with
right.
all of those things that I've mentioned.
Right.
We're all incredibly unique, and we're all worth knowing.
Yes.
um and to walk around feeling like you're not is horrible.
Yeah, it is.
um so yeah, it's such a gift to meet people that care about what you say and care
Mm.
about what you think and how you feel and what you've been through.
Yeah.
um it's just an amazing gift to give other people, and it breaks my heart that we seem to live in a world where the majority of people are so self-focused, and materialism and consumerism, and it's just so surfacey. And
Yeah.
I think about the inner workings of our hearts and us as people, and it's in my mind, it's way more complicated in a good way and flashier than anything you could ever purchase, or
Yeah.
more exciting than any cliff you could dive off of. I mean, it's insane to me that people turn to these other things and just completely forgo one of the most amazing things I think God has allowed us to experience: other human beings, other people.
Right.
So yeah,
That
that's my
was
thoughts on it.
that was wonderful, Jen. Thank you for sharing. And I'm glad that you're willing to be as open as you are about that, because it can be a difficult and scary thing. I'll just say before I ask Glenn this, and we'll close up for the night, guys. When I saw you, and later on you told me that everything that you struggled with, I was just completely shocked, because when I saw you as a person that was very hungry to get to know other people and to be known by them. I didn't see your at first, of course, I didn't see your struggle in this area to feel like you weren't worth knowing. I didn't pick up on that. And as I've said, I feel like God showed me the internal part of you that you were just that part of you struggling to get out, because immediately, it's like you said, overnight, it was almost like that part came to the front immediately, like it'd
Yeah.
been waiting to do that for years. It just jumped right at the front and said, "Hello, here I am." And that's been the way it's been ever since. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad that you shared that, and I'm glad that you found people that were willing to pursue you, and that made the effort. And on my part, it wasn't any effort at all. It was as simple as breathing. You are an easy person to get to know, and I think
Oh,
Glenn would agree. So it'll be his turn next, but it was wonderful to meet another person that was a deep thinker and that was willing to answer tough questions. Because Glenn certainly has some tough questions.
I can dish them out.
He can dish 'em out, and you were willing to answer every one. So uh, just you're an amazing person to get to
Oh,
know. I'm
thanks,
glad you
babe.
took the opportunity to do that. All right, last one, Glenn. This one's for you. We feel lonely when we feel nobody understands us or is prepared to make the effort to do so. What do you think?
No way am I going to add to what Jen said, which I thought was very beautiful. So I'm going to
Yeah, what?
leave the glory with Jen for the evening.
Okay. I think that's fair. That's fair. Okay, we'll end with a quote, which is a good one. A real friend is one who walks in when the rest of the world walks out. And that quote is from Walter Winchell. All right, guys, that's it for us. Tonight's topic has been a great one, in my opinion: solitude and loneliness lost in this world. As I said, the link is in the description. Go give that song a listen. And thanks to Glenn for putting together yet another wonderful write up, thought provoking and interesting, in all the questions and statements that it brings about. So, for everyone that was here in the chat, Gosh, I just appreciate your guys' conversation. I've been glancing over and watching you talk to each other, and just by doing that, I know I said earlier that online, is not as good as face to face, but I didn't mean to imply that there's no value in it. I didn't say there wasn't any value in it, but I can see that you guys are really honestly building each other up. I see some conversations between people where you're lifting each other up, and that's what people need, honestly. People need other people to, reach out to them and listen to your story and say, "Hey, what you're going through is hard. Keep moving forward." That is so beneficial. So we appreciate you guys in the chat, especially if you're listening to playback. Thank you for stopping by, and we hope that eventually you'll come and join us in the chat and have some of these meaningful conversations with the good people that are here. But we appreciate you listening. So again, if you have any criticisms or you have any positive things that you want to say about True Story Live, you can send an email to me at truestorylive.crips@gmail.com. And again, if you want to leave something for Glenn or Jen, you can put that in the subject line and I'll make sure that they get it. Well, that's it for us tonight. I hope everyone has a good week, and I'll turn it over to Jen to say goodbye to the peoples.
Oh, you guys, this was a good topic. And
Yeah.
I just want to say, you are all worth knowing. You're all worth the time it takes
Yeah.
to get to know. Some people are more quick to open up, and some people have every right to take their time
Yeah.
because of the hurt they've gone through. I just want you to know that you're worth knowing. You
Yep.
guys are all very, very special and precious to God and to us.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys
Good
have a
point.
great night, and we're always praying for you guys. And I just so
Yeah.
appreciate you being a part of this discussion and being a part of this deep stuff. I know it's not everybody's bag of chips,
Right.
but we're so glad you're here hanging out with us and talking
Yep.
about the deep stuff.
Thanks, Jen. All right, Glenn, say goodbye to the people, sir.
Good night, everyone. And Jen, you've done, well, I don't know what I'm even doing here. You've done, you've done incredibly well. You don't
It's all
need
about
any
your
words.
accent. That's why we keep you around, Glenn.
Wonderfully done, Jen, and good night.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Glenn. And I'll say good night to everyone. And if we don't have any more technical difficulties, then of course we'll be back again next Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope everyone has a good week, and take care of each other. And I will say one more thing. In talking about all this loneliness, as Jen said, you can be the light for someone else. Someone else might be even more lonely than you are. So there are people out there that you don't understand. I don't think you understand the need that they have for someone to come alongside them, as I said, and to lift them up and to give them a little bit of empathy. And what it does for you when you do that, seeing a person light up when you acknowledge them and validate them, can go a long way. So it's mutually beneficial. So be that light for someone else. You have no idea what a person's situation is. So you do have that opportunity every day. I believe that God puts people in your path that you can leave in a better position than when they met you. You can be that person that does something that can reach out to someone else. All right, that's it for us. Hope you guys, I probably third time I've said this, have a great week, and we'll be back again next weekend. Until then,